Charter schools, merit pay, accountability, testing. What has education reform accomplished in the last decade? Are we providing the best we can for our children and their future? Stay with us for Metro Center Presents.
This episode of Metro Center Presents is brought to you in part by the UCF Metropolitan Center for Regional Studies and the Orlando Sentinel.
Education and the future of public schools. That's the subject of our special edition of Metro Center Presents. Welcome. I'm Diane Trees, Director of the UCF Metropolitan Center for Regional Studies and host of Metro Center Outlook. A packed house attests to the interest in this important debate as former Governor Jeb Bush and other education leaders share their views on shaping the future of education in Florida. Join us now as they examine pressing education issues from merit pay to charter schools to virtual education on Metro Center Presents.
Thank you all for coming. It's a terrific turnout. We're really glad to see it. It shows what an intense interest there is in a common interest in education in our community. This morning we're fortunate to have with us a panel whose expertise extends from the classroom to the boardroom to the halls of government. These folks are game changers, and we're delighted they could all be here today. Our first panelist is Jeb Bush, who served as governor of Florida from 1999 through 2007. Governor Bush championed numerous education reforms, notably a school accountability law that created Florida's annual school grades. Since leaving office, he continues to promote education reform as founder and current chairman of two policy organizations: the Foundation for Florida's Future, which established the state's first charter school and promotes education reform in Florida, and the Foundation for Excellence in Education, which promotes reform throughout the nation. He is the son of former President George H.W. Bush and the brother of former President George W. Bush. Governor Bush, your remarks?
Thank you. As a former governor, I can't turn on a microphone, but can you all hear me? Apparently it's on. It's great to be back in Orlando, and I am delighted to be with such an esteemed group of people to talk about what I consider to be the most important issue facing our state and our country, which is how do we assure that more children gain the power of knowledge so that they can live lives of purpose and we can sustain the greatness of our country. In Florida, I had the opportunity as a candidate for governor and then as governor to implement what I said in the campaign I would do. It's one of those novel things in politics where you say you're going to do something and then you actually do it. I had that opportunity to do it, and it reversed a generation of decline in our state. We were ranked by all the outside measurements, the NAEP score being the principal one, 4th and 8th grade math. Florida was bumping at the bottom. Literally, in 1998, 4th grade reading, we were 29th out of 31, leading some to mutter, not myself, of course, thank God for Mississippi and Louisiana, and whose states have also seen reforms since then and have improved. But we've gone from that, fast forward 10 years later, that same test administered now to all states, we're 6th out of 50. And the reason I say this is that reform takes time. It took more than a generation of time to get where we were, and it's going to take a significant amount of time to get where we aspire to be. Our graduation rates are up. Our scores across the board are up as measured by the nation's report card. This happened because of accountability, a command focus on childhood literacy, particularly in the early grades. We funded teachers to teach teachers how to teach reading. The elementary schools had a direct impact in improving results. We eliminated social promotion in 3rd grade, which was a challenge, but it has yielded, by outside experts, significant results. We expanded school choice programs to make them the most expansive in the country, which put added pressure and empowerment for parents and added pressure on the system. And going forward, because my personal belief is if you're not advocating additional changes, atrophy sets in and you start going backwards. Success is never final in anything in life, and certainly in education. Going forward, I think the next iterations of reform need to be to pay teachers based on student learning and give them significantly higher pay, which means that thankfully and hopefully the legislature will fund these reforms that were passed this year. A focus on keeping intact the accountability systems, but moving to Common Core standards, which are significantly higher than what we have today. In the country, a third of our kids are college or career ready, and those standards will show that for the world to see. And sadly, in Florida, there's not much difference. So the implementation of rigorous, higher standards, and then finally, a passionate embrace, if you will, of technology so that we customize the learning experience, where teachers manage that experience, where students are held accountable and really more responsible for their own learning, where teachers are their coaches and their supporters, so that we can get significantly higher number of our students gaining the power of knowledge. That's what I've been up to since I've left being governor.
Thanks, Governor. Kathleen Oropeza is one of 3 Florida mothers who founded fundeducationnow.org. The statewide advocacy organization was established in 2009 in response to the state legislature's public education cuts. Fund Education Now has filed a lawsuit against the Florida legislature for what the group says is a failure to provide the kind of education guaranteed under the Florida Constitution. Ms. Oropeza formerly worked in the advertising industry and has 2 children attending public school. Ms. Oropeza?
Thank you. When Fund Education Now began 3 full years ago, my oldest son, Nicholas, was in 3rd grade. Like every 3rd grader in Florida, he was facing FCAT for the first time, and a year heavy on test prep. Orange County Public Schools faced a $240 million cut. Superintendent Ron Blocker called the cuts criminal and catastrophic. He asked everyone to engage parents and raise the alarm. Mr. Blocker is not an alarmist, so when he said this, it really caught my attention. Like so many, I was guilty of not paying attention to the power state politics has on us on a personal level in our schools. Within days, I was joined by my partners, Christine Bermucci and Linda Covert, and we were up and running with a website for other parents to go and learn what we were learning. We exist for one reason. We love our kids. We want the best for our children and the children of Florida. We have traveled all over Florida meeting other parent groups like us. This is an alliance of education advocates that works together to speak for children. I was truly in shock when we realized that our children stand alone, unrepresented by any professional lobbyist in Tallahassee. Imagine that. How many hundreds of lobbyists roam the halls at the Capitol representing testing companies? Even Ostrich Feed has 7 or 8 lobbyists. The reforms imposed by politicians revolve around 2 words, choice and accountability. Choice means less choice in public schools and more privatization. Accountability means a very narrow curriculum. Everything rides on a high-stakes test. 1 test, 1 day. What makes public education great? It's not data collection. It's the people. It's the collaboration of teachers, parents, and volunteers willing to fight for the future of one child after another. The will of the people regarding education is clearly reflected in our state constitution. High-quality public education is a fundamental value of the people of the state. I mentor a precious little boy named Julian, who's excited to be in 3rd grade. He's optimistic, he's smart, and he wants to be a policeman. He's innocent about what FCAT means. Even though he reads 2 grades above level and knows his multiplication tables, Florida politicians believe that a single high-stakes test should define him. 1 test, 1 day will never define Nicholas, and it will never define Julian. Today is about the future of education. We've arrived here 10 years after experimenting with these reforms. Our ACT scores are flat, our SAT scores have declined, and our legislature has systematically defunded our public schools. We believe that Florida politicians have lost the plot. We believe that we can do better. We should invest in proven solutions that work, not these old reforms. It's time to bring back some common sense and invest in a system that does have proven track records and is worth saving. And it is time to invest in a generation of children who are critical thinkers and are able to compete in a global economy. It's really time to put our children first.
Thank you. Let's move along. Thanks very much. Tracy McDaniel is the founder and director of KIPP Reach College Preparatory in Oklahoma City. KIPP is an acronym for Knowledge is Power program, a national network of over 100 charter schools that was featured in the 2010 documentary Waiting for Superman. Florida's first KIPP school opened in Jacksonville last year. KIPP Reach, Mr. McDaniel's school, serves students in predominantly low-income families in grades 5 to 8. Mr. McDaniel has been a public school teacher or administrator for 19 years and is an ordained minister. Mr. McDaniel.
Thank you. It's hard to follow that, but I see what I can do. I am from the proud state of Oklahoma, and no, I was not at the football game on Saturday night. but I'm glad to be here anyway. My story. I was a product of Oklahoma City Public Schools, grew up in inner city public schools, became a teacher maybe 6 blocks from my neighborhood where I grew up, became administrator probably 3 blocks from the home that I grew up in. But my hands were tied. The inner city of Oklahoma City, low performing. The state of Oklahoma is at the bottom of those states, as Governor Bush mentioned a minute ago. We're there as well. And so I wanted to make a difference within my community and with my kids. I'd seen the KIPP program on the 60 Minute show when they had the 2 schools in New York City and Houston, founded by 2 Teach for America alumni, Mike Feinberg and Dave Levin. And I thought, wouldn't that be intriguing to bring a program like that to my city, give me the freedom to run the program, and to implement the changes that I needed to implement. And so back in 2001, I left that job as administrator and trained for KIPP for a year. 2002, I started my school with 5th graders. Excited to learn, excited to be there. We had a longer school day, more time on task. We had school on Saturdays. We had school in the summer. So we had a double block of math and a double block of reading every single day. And it was a middle school 5 through 8. Most happy about over the last 5 years, inner city Oklahoma City now, our schools had the highest performing 8th grade class in the entire state for the last 5 years. And so that's both reading and math scores. So what we're proving is that there's nothing wrong with the kids. The kids are the only ones who can't advocate for their learning, and so someone has to do that for them. I'm also happy to say my 5th graders back in 2002, they're now in college. They're sophomores in college, so I have 2 classes now in college. 80% of that first class, even though I didn't have a high school, 80% of those at first class are in college now. I even have kids from Oklahoma, most of them in Oklahoma, but I even have kids going to Mount Holyoke, Princeton University, and we're pretty excited about what we're doing at KIPP and how we're making a difference. And so when I started KIPP, we were in 2 states, including Washington, D.C. Today we're in 20 states, including D.C., and we have 109 KIPP schools. And happy to be here and happy to answer your questions.
Thank you. Voters chose Bill Sublette last year to become Orange County's first elected school board chairman, a key leadership position for one of the nation's largest school districts. Before that, he served in the Florida House of Representatives for 8 years, where he served as chairman of the Education Appropriations Committee. Mr. Sublette has also participated in a number of education-related pursuits, including chairman of Orange County's Blue Ribbon Panel on Education, which began in 2004. He's a lawyer and has 3 children in Orange County schools. Mr. Sublette.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you to the Sentinel and to UCF for inviting me to participate and Orange County Public Schools to participate in this forum. Thank you also to each and every one of you for showing up today, because your presence here today is evidence of your commitment to public schools. And as I always like to say when I'm out speaking to groups in this community, to have a truly great urban school system, it's going to require a team effort of the entire community. So thank you very, very much. We are in the midst of a revolution in public education in America, a revolution which began 2 decades ago and is only accelerating. What began as a push for accountability with the advent of the Sunshine State Standards, FCAT, and the A+ grading system has grown to a tidal wave of change in how we deliver a free public education. School choice has expanded with the dramatic expansion of charter schools and with an ever-expanding menu of transfer options in the form of opportunity scholarships, No Child Left Behind transfers, McKay scholarships, and corporate tax credit vouchers. Education is moving out of the brick-and-mortar classroom with the advent of virtual education. And when coupled with the expansion of magnet schools, it becomes more clear every day that the era of Johnny and Susie attending the neighborhood school down the block is rapidly drawing to a close. And last but not least, for the first time in many, many decades, teachers will now be paid on merit, as most of us are in the private sector, and no longer on seniority. The accountability movement championed by Governor Bush has led to the dramatic improvement of public education. Because of the accountability measures put into place over a decade ago, a Florida public education is more rigorous today than it has been in decades, and the numbers bear that out. We have made more progress in closing the minority achievement gap and raising our test scores than virtually any other state in the union. And Florida's public school system is now ranked a previously unheard of 5th in the entire country in K-12 achievement after being mired in the bottom third for decades. But with great change also comes great challenges, and we face difficult choices in public education. Do we simply walk away from the billions of dollars we have invested as taxpayers in our public education infrastructure over the past century? Will we be allowed to demand accountability from the countless speculators who have swamped our school boards with charter school applications, many with no real education qualifications or experience, simply because they see a government pot of gold out there? How do we fund technology, class size restrictions, and meaningful merit pay while attracting the best and the brightest to our classrooms with an education budget which ranks 39th in this country in per pupil funding? And how do we convince our policymakers that meaningful vocational education still deserves a seat at the table, that our current one-size-fits-all curriculum, with its philosophy that every student, regardless of intellect, talents, or ability, will graduate from a four-year university with a bachelor's degree, is a delusional fantasy directly correlated to our country's dropout crisis? These are the times we live in, and these are the challenges we face. I look forward to your questions and to addressing those questions today. Thank you.
Finally, James Gibbs is a teacher at Burns Middle School in Brandon. He's a coordinator for the AVID program, which stands for Achievement via Individual Determination. He is a U.S. Air Force veteran who earned a bachelor's and master's degrees while serving his country. Mr. Gibbs has been teaching at Burns since retiring from the military in 2002, and in 2007 was named Hillsborough County's Teacher of the Year. He also coaches the track team and the girls' fast-pitch softball team. Mr. Gibbs.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you for everyone for your attendance today. To the Sentinel, I give many thanks. UCF for your support, and all of you who are in attendance. I'm humbled to be here on such a fine panel, and I warrant the opportunity. I look forward to the opportunity to answer questions. I'm truly humbled to be here as a teacher, but I think I'm going to give that grassroots response that many people need to hear as we pass legislation where I'm not sure we're considering what the real impact is in the classroom. True, I did serve in the military 24 years as an intelligence officer, and it didn't even prepare me for the war zone that is the public schools and the middle schools. I knew as early as third grade that I wanted to be a teacher, and it was always my dream to be in that classroom. See, I grew up in a time where teachers were respected and revered, where the students were globally relevant, where students wanted and needed to be teachers. The harsh reality of it is, though, I had to take care of my family, and I needed a job that would pay and sustain that family. 24 years in the military provided a retirement check to where I can now afford to be a school teacher, and I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm sad to say it feels like, as a school teacher, that we are constantly under attack, that it seems that every ill will or every bad thing that's happening in the United States can be pointed towards a school teacher. I don't say that because I feel like we're the blame for everything. It just seems that we have so many of the answers, yet we're not given the support that we need as teachers to provide the answers that people are looking for. There is no question that our students are not as globally or internationally strong as we once used to be. And we teachers want those students to find that success. We want our students to be the great people they're destined to be. I'm here today not to speak for myself, not to advocate for myself, but to put up the good fight for the public schools, for the teachers, and most certainly for our students. Thank you for having me today.
Okay. Well, thank you all for setting the table. Let's move on to some of the courses now. Why don't we spend a couple of minutes talking about something that a couple of you raised, which is the reform initiative that was passed by one of the reform initiatives passed by the legislature this year that dealt with compensation and evaluation of teachers based on student learning gains and other measures. James Gibbs, you're a teacher, you're in the classroom. What kind of effect is this going to have on what you do? And maybe you can address what's wrong with paying teachers based more on performance of the students instead of the way they were previously evaluated.
Again, speaking as a teacher and in the classroom and the apparent impact that it has on us, quite frankly, I'm scared to death. I'm actually appalled at the legislation as it was passed without what appears to be due consideration for what's happening within the classroom. The simple fact of basing pay, merit pay, for a teacher at a 50 percentile ratio is astounding when we consider what it takes to have a student find achievements find success on a high-stakes test. I must have a disclaimer that I am in Hillsborough County, and because we had success with the Bill Gates Foundation, and we are doing some phenomenal things in our county and have been at it for quite some time, we're a little bit to the side of the legislation, not quite exempt, but still very fearful of what could happen. Merit pay 50%. All right, I have little Johnny in my classroom. Little Johnny is ADHD. Little Johnny has an absentee rating that is through the roof. He might be a migrant. I'm not sure because he seems to disappear during strawberry picking season and whenever there's something in bloom, the oranges. But yet on that one high-stakes moment, that time in March, April, where it seems our only attention is on FCATs and success on FCATs, well, you know what? Little Johnny didn't do as well on his test because, well, he was up till 2 in the morning because he has 3 siblings in the house, and his mother was working, and there might not be a father in the household. And Johnny went to sleep in that test. And now my pay, my success as a classroom teacher is based upon that one moment in time, that 1 hour in that classroom that doesn't give any indication of the amount of effort that I put into little Johnny as a success in my classroom. That doesn't even, Mike, I'm sorry, that doesn't even go to talk about teacher tenure loss. It doesn't go into loss of collective bargaining, our right to arbitrate. It strips what appears to be a straight-out attack upon the unions. I can't even begin to tell you how disheartening it is that we would take away any ability to collectively bargain, to work together with our administrators and our government to give the best for our students.
Okay. Well, that's a good starting point. If I could ask the speakers not to speak too close to your microphones, there's sort of a sweet spot right there. But Governor Bush, you mentioned merit pay in your opening remarks. How do you see it shaping up, and is it fair to teachers who face students who have individual challenges and home challenges as well?
All this brings back fond memories of the arguments that have been taking place for the last decade of time in Florida. We constantly say that Juanito, not probably Johnny, Juanito, the migrant worker, is not fair to have one expectation for Juanito than for Johnny, who lives in Seminole County at an affluent school. And by changing the accountability system and now moving towards a next series of reforms, we actually are proving that God has given Juanito the ability to learn just as well. In fact, in Florida, not by the dreaded FCAT that gives kids acne and stresses them out for the rest of their lives apparently, but by the NAEP test, which is not a test that you can teach to. the National Academic Education Progress Test, known as the nation's report card, Hispanic kids, low-income Hispanic kids, if they were a state, are better than the California average. They're better than 10 states now, from the very back to above the national average. Hispanic kids in general are better to or equal than 31 states. And so one of the arguments against accountability is it's not fair, and I would argue it's not fair. It is not fair to treat children by the color of their skin or by whether they have a vowel at the end of their name or some expectation you place on them because of their life circumstances. It's not fair to treat them at a lower standard. And that's what we had before, and we don't have that now. Now, to move forward, we need to make sure that this assessment is fair. That's why it's only 50%, not uncommon, by the way, than the 40% that goes on in Hillsborough County. Not a significant difference, and that end-of-course exams will now be created not exclusively based on the FCAT, because many teachers teach courses that require content that a test can give, and it's based on learning gains. One other final nerdy point on this, lower performing students have higher learning gains. Lower performing students have a lower base, and if teachers interact with these students, by and large, what you find is that they have higher learning gains, and that's the history of Florida. And that's why we have seen these greater gains, is that we have done the best with the lowest performing students. So the arguments that teachers somehow it's unfair to be dealing with the lowest performing students, the exact opposite when you look at the data will play out, and those teachers will be rewarded more, which is what they should do. Final point, all of this can't be done without funding. You cannot have a merit pay system unless you're funding merit. And if you don't fund merit, then it'll be like many reforms in the past in Florida, which are good, well-intended ideas that aren't backed up with money.
Okay, Bill Sublette, you caught my eye just a moment ago. You're chairman of a very large school district. How's this going to play out in schools?
Well, thank you, Mike. And I think there are so many misperceptions about merit pay, but let me at the outset make a few observations. First of all, the old system based simply on seniority of a teacher simply wasn't working. I've been involved in education policy for 20-plus years, and I thought I knew a fair amount about it. But one of the things that shocked me when I got elected, because I never knew this, is for the first time I had to look at the step pay seniority pay plan for our teachers in Orange County. And through collective bargaining, it had been negotiated that a teacher entering his or her 5th year got less than a 1% pay raise, whereas a teacher entering his or her 19th year got a 7% pay raise. And that progression worked all the way up the scale. Now think of the message that sends to a young, dynamic, bright teacher that we don't value your teaching in the classroom as much as a teacher who's been in the classroom 15 to 20 years. Think of the message that sends to a teacher who, frankly, to be very honest about, is burnout and ready to leave the classroom. The message is says, hang on, baby, because your retirement pay is based upon those 5, 6, 7% bumps you get in the last 5 years of your seniority pay plan. It simply wasn't working. The other observation I will have is that one of the things that Governor Bush pointed out is there's a misperception out there that merit pay is based on the raw test score, that a teacher with higher socioeconomic kids has a greater opportunity to get merit pay than a teacher with a high poverty classroom. Actually, the exact opposite is true. It's based upon learning growth. And the reason you see schools bounce up all the time from an F or a D to an A or a B, but have a hard time staying there, is because so much of the school grade is based upon learning growth. So if you take a classroom of kids who are at the median of 50 on a 1 to 100 scale, there's a lot more room there with a high poverty classroom for learning growth than, say, a teacher going to a high wealth neighborhood where all the kids are already testing at a 90 or a 95. All that being said, though, there's a very simple solution to merit pay, in my opinion, and it's one that just frustrates the absolute dickens out of me. And that is to establish a merit pay system that's the same merit pay system that each and every one of us have in the private sector, and that even Colonel Gibbs had while he was in the military. And that is that your pay is based, simply put, on the evaluation of your supervisor, period. When I was a young lawyer and I went to work for a law firm, my pay was based on whether my managing partner thought I was doing a good job or not. If you're an engineer or an accountant or in any other profession, banking, your pay is based upon the evaluation of your supervisor. That would be the simple, cleanest merit pay system. The problem is the unions will never, ever go for a system based upon the evaluation of the principal alone, because they argue that politics then works its way into the system. And every time I hear that, I go, well, hello, that's the way it is in the real world. Your performance is based upon the evaluation of your supervisor. And I grew up in the military and the Army. I always draw an analogy to the military. My father was a career Army officer. There is no guarantee in the military that if you're a captain, you're getting promoted to a major, or if you're a major, you're getting promoted to colonel. If you're a colonel, your supervisor doesn't like you, you're up or out in the Army. So school teachers and the insistence on step pay seniority that the unions have fought for, it's really the last bastion of that in this country, and it's a time, it's an era whose time has come. We've got to find a way to implement meaningful merit pay because, frankly, I don't think there's any appetite in this country any longer for pure step-based seniority systems, and the old way, folks, simply wasn't working. Thank you.
Kathleen Oropeza, I think you looked like you had something to say.
I do. I have to take extreme exception to this. Teacher merit pay has been tried in this country for 90 years. Since the 1920s, some form of teacher merit pay, some sort of monetary reward for performance. What everybody's failing to get here is that teachers enter the profession not as business people. They have a calling. They come to teaching for a reason sometimes greater than how much, clearly how much money they're going to make. There is tremendous pressure based on or put on our children over this merit pay thing because they realize, my 11-year-old realizes that his test performance is going to dictate whether or not his teacher gets a pay raise. Everybody talks about it. Legislators did not fund this, this bill 736. They didn't put any funding at all. It's a $1 billion bill, nothing attached to it. Where's the money going to come from? Finally, Vanderbilt did a well-known study that was released in September of 2010, a year ago, where they did a longitudinal look at two groups of teachers. One group of teacher was operating for a $15,000 bonus. The other group wasn't. And they found resoundingly there was no difference in performance. They taught because they loved to teach. When you talk about a lower performing child and making all these gains, well, that's predicated on whether or not they make AYP, according to NCLB. So if they don't make AYP, and the child does make gains, they still are deemed a failure in the eyes of the state.
AYP being annual yearly progress.
Adequate yearly progress. I do think that since we have a fully funded, piloted test going on in Hillsborough County, it might be a good idea to look and see, you know, times are tough, money's tight. Why don't we look and see what works and take what works from them and use that and maybe throw out what doesn't work. And finally, the end of course exams, that's multiplying the stress and all of the things that we talked about with FCAT times how many times they're going to take these tests. I just am not sure that's the best way to evaluate teachers, and it's not the best way for our kids to go through school.
Okay, well, I actually take an issue I had for later out of order since it's come up a couple of times, and we might actually find some common ground here, and that has to do with funding of education and funding of merit pay. Governor Bush, maybe you can get started. Is Florida adequately funding its public education system as it exists now? And what about the absence of funding for from the merit pay measure?
Well, first of all, I want to make sure I don't get deposed.
No, there's no court.
So the typical
reporter.
answer is there is there's a plaintiff in you're a plaintiff, right? Plaintiff in a lawsuit. So.
I thought that was about me, Governor. I was like, whoa.
No, those were the old days, Bill. So from a legal perspective, the question is undoubtedly we are funded adequately as it relates to the Constitution. Now, yeah, you can say whatever you want. I'm avoiding a deposition.
Not by me.
Because I'm going to be hard to find if you're coming after me.
I don't know. I'm a mom.
In real terms, for 8 years, all I know is when the old dude was there 5 years ago, and for 8 years we had real funding per student increases every year. We were in good times, and we made higher education, the K-12 system as the first priority, and so we funded our priorities. We also funded the reforms, which was the point I was going to make. That if you want to pass reforms, for example, expanding PSAT for every student, Local districts were responsible before. They weren't doing it. In fact, ironically, A and B school, high schools, 100% of the kids or 80, 90% of the kids were getting PSAT, AP courses as far as the eye could see in the fancy pants high school. Underperforming urban core or rural high schools were having 15% of the kids take practice SAT and very few AP classes that existed. So the state, we wanted to have more access to higher quality courses for kids that were left behind traditionally under the old system. We had to fund those things, and we did. We funded school recognition dollars to reward students at schools that were showing gains. We funded the literacy efforts because those were important. We funded supplemental monies to make sure that there were strategies around the kids that were struggling readers in third grade. And I think that has to be the strategy. So if the legislature passes, which I'm happy they did, a provocative bill that rewards teachers for a job well done, over the next 3 years when this starts kicking in, you better make sure that those things are funded, because if you're not going to reward people for doing a great job, then it eliminates the kind of catalytic converter of reform that would be one would expect.
Kathleen Orpez, something tells me you have a take on. But one thing I wanted to ask you about, I mean, the context of your answer is Florida has seen improvements in a variety of measures of its students, and so can you talk about the need to fund education in the context of how well students are doing now?
I think it ought to be the highest priority. I'm not in Tallahassee now, so I'm not going to be critical of dealing with declining revenue numbers, but to me this is the first priority. And when I acted as governor, that was what I tried to make it be.
Kathleen Orpez?
See, there is common ground. Thank you. I agree. In fact,
you're not going to sue me, and not going to send one of your fancy lawyers. Ron Meyer's not going to come to my office.
He's not my lawyer.
Yeah, I bet he is.
No, another old friend of yours, John Mills.
Okay.
Yeah.
Same team.
Okay. So, and anyway, so the point is here that there is a systematic effort to defund our traditional public schools. They're doing it through paying lots and lots of money to high-stakes testing companies. They're doing it through vouchers and an unproven charter system. We have cut $4 billion in the last 3 years. It's hurting our children and harming our schools in many ways. We all know what's going on. How many of us had to pay lots of money for cookie dough and wrapping paper this week, right? Okay. Politicians can't continue to cut these billions from public education and at the same time shovel the billions out the back door to these separate, unequal, and unfair different types of public schools. These cuts are unsustainable, they're clearly unconstitutional, but this isn't just about the money. I would never stand here or sit here and say that, but everybody in this room knows at the end of the day you do get what you pay for. And if you took class size out of the funding mix right now, our current funding is so low, it's at the 1999 levels. That's not good for our kids. I know that. So, thank you.
Okay. I wanted to turn to Tracy McDaniel for a moment. He came all this way from Oklahoma and trying to find forgiveness among FSU fans. The KIPP school that you founded has had some success, and of course the KIPP school in Florida got its first grade and didn't do very well, got an F. But no, maybe you could talk about...
Started this year.
Started this year.
It doesn't have any grades. No,
okay.
I'm telling you, that's not true. KIPP schools are awesome schools, and this is their first year in Jacksonville.
Okay, well, at any rate, Mr. McDaniel, if you could talk about how in Oklahoma do charter schools, how does the state of Oklahoma hold your school accountable for its performance?
Well, first of all, I would like to say that even with the school in Jacksonville, the results came in and they were not up to KIPP standards. So we make no excuses for that either. And what we're doing is rolling our sleeves up. We're going back to work because over 90% of our schools are successful. The way we hold ourselves accountable in charter schools in Oklahoma, the authorizer is there. We're authorized by the public school district in the top largest two cities in the state of Oklahoma. The authorizers are our charter authorizers, and we have to meet the demands of that charter. But the bottom line, if you don't have results, I wouldn't have a charter school. And so the discussion I'm hearing today is a lot of things about standardized tests and teacher accountability. But the bottom line, if the kids don't pass those tests, we're out of business. And what we're proving at KIPP is high expectations for all kids. All of my feeder schools, when they come to me, 77% every single year of my kids are 2 grade levels below in reading and math. And over a course of 4 years, we have 100% of our kids passing 8th grade exams. And so we're saying through high expectations for kids, you got to have great teachers in the classroom, and you got to pay the teachers too. But excuses are not an option with KIPP. And so we roll up our sleeves, we go to work, but the bottom line is if we don't produce, we don't stay in business.
I just want to make a point because I think a lot of people, if you read not the Orlando Sentinel, but other newspapers about this or go on the internet, you'll think that charter schools are private schools. These are independent public schools. They take all comers. They try different things. All schools, all public schools should be school-based in terms of the management and responsibility. There should be a focus on outcomes. And so if a school, as we've had in the past, schools that are graded, and we have an accountability system that actually can measure how schools do based on student learning. So if schools have Fs as part of the contract with the district, they should be closed. Is that the case for every public school in every district in the state? The answer is no. I think that's the kind of thing we need to move to, is accept failure only to make it better. Recognize that it's not working so that you mitigate around these children before it's too late, because these learning gaps are humongous. And that's what KIPP does. It's a model for one type of kid, and it's been enormously successful. It's not necessarily scalable. It's not going to replicate the whole public school system by any stretch of the imagination, but we should have a myriad of choices for parents and for students so that we can make sure all kids learn.
Well, Bill Sublette, you've had some experience with charter schools. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about where that sweet spot is, where charter schools as public schools are held accountable versus giving them the independence to act independently.
I would love to, because it's something we've struggled with on the Orange County School Board. But before I answer that, Mike, I do feel compelled as a school board chair in this county to say emphatically thank you to this community for passage of the one meal local option last year. Make no mistake about it, public schools in the state of Florida are underfunded. We are taking disproportionate cuts. We've lost over $1,000 per student over the last 4 years alone. But thanks to you stepping up to the plate and funding our public schools, we're not in the same level of crises that Seminole, Osceola, Lake, Volusia, and other counties in this state are, so thank you for that. We on the Orange County School Board, we've really struggled, and we're going to be sending some things up, I suspect, to Tallahassee to try to demand accountability of our charter schools. And I want to make something very, very clear at the outset. The KIPP schools are excellent charter schools. The Green Dot schools are excellent charter schools. But as there's something I point out to folks all the time, education can be very, very complicated. But there's one thing that's very simple in education, and that is that time on instruction equals performance, period. It's that simple. The KIPP schools, one of the keys to their success, and they deserve kudos for it, is we spend 180 days per year in school. In the public schools, KIPP schools spend 205 to 210 days per year. We spend from 8:30 in the morning till 2:15 in the afternoon and 2:30 in the afternoon in classroom instruction. KIPP school students go to school at 7:30 in the morning, and 70% of them stay till 5 p.m. in the evening, and they go on Saturdays. We have got to make a decision as a state if we are going to fund more time on instruction. We spend less time on instruction than any westernized country in the world. Less time than Finland, Norway, England, Spain, France, Italy, Japan, Hong Kong, Singapore, you go down the list. And then we wonder and scratch our heads why our student performance lags. It's simple math, folks. We need more time on instruction. We are struggling with our charter schools. Let me give you some numbers real quickly here, and then I'll turn it back to you, Mike. 51 F schools in the state of Florida last year, okay? 23 of those F schools were charter schools. Now, to put that in perspective, only 5% of the state's student population attends a charter school, yet they made up fully 45% of the state's failing schools. Here in Orange County, 14 of our 19 charter schools that received a grade received reading scores significantly less than the average reading score of an Orange County Public Schools student. And a lot of charter advocates will say, well, they're educating a harder to educate population. Well, I asked staff yesterday in preparation of this to pull me the numbers on the alternative charter schools. We have an OCPS alternative school, and 3 of the 4 alternative charter schools have test scores significantly lower than the publicly run alternative school, Acceleration Academy, that we run here in Orange County. We've got to have more accountability. Now, we have some great charter schools here in Orange County, make no mistake about it. UCP runs some great schools for a severely disabled population. Lake Eola Charter downtown and the Oakland Avenue Charter are great charter schools, and their test scores reflect it. But we have an overwhelming majority that are failing our students, and yet we cannot go in and intervene and yank that charter without going through a laborious, nearly 1-year process. We started to shut down Amani Charter School in October after it opened in September. Literally, we were moving forward legally under the statutory construct within 6 weeks of opening to shut down that school. By the time all the time frames passed for appeals and notice requirements and response requirements, it was March before we were able to shut that down. But by that time, those children had lost an entire year of education. And when the test scores finally came out in June, only 18% of those kids could read at grade level. Now, there was a woman who I've known for years who said, well, you need to build that into your contracts and more accountability. We're going to try to. We're going to try to require that every charter in this county going forward obtain at least 1 C grade, what a low bar, at least 1 C grade in a 4-year period, or their charter is subject to revocation. We'll see if they appeal that, and our board attorney's telling me, well, if they appeal that, we could owe them attorney's fees. I say, go for it. If they want to take it up to appeal, the argument that they can't get at least 1 C grade in 4 years, let them take that up on appeal. We're going to try to build into our contracts with the charters that they receive a letter grade from the state of Florida at least 2 years of every 4 years that they're eligible. Because we have charter schools that test enough students and have enough students to obtain a letter grade, which year in, year out that have enough students, but don't test enough students to get a letter grade. Could you imagine if we had a public school with 500 kids in it or 1,000 kids in it, and we just thumbed our nose at the state and said, we're not going to test enough kids to get a state letter grade? We'd have the DOE on our back, yanking our principal out and our administration out quicker than you can say Jack Flash. We've got to do a better job of monitoring charters. We're going to try to do it. I think we're going to face some legal challenges, but I hope we get the support of some opinion leaders in doing that. Thank you.
Thanks. So James Gibbs, is more time on instruction needed? Do you think that's is that something this table might be able to agree on, that Florida needs to have either longer school days or more school days in the year?
Well, you put me on the spot because everybody's agreed straight down the line.
Okay. Your turn.
And we do want to find common ground, and I found it interesting that you brought up that, you know, we're way behind the other countries who are spending time on instruction, and we're not going to argue as teachers. There's definitely a lack of time on instruction. What we're hard-pressed to see, though, is when you mention that 8:30 to 2:15, you don't recognize that the teachers are in at 7 o'clock and not leaving until 5 o'clock in the evening, or 6 o'clock, or 7 o'clock if you're a math teacher. But we do need time on instruction. That's a valid point. I do believe the students could gain by that. I like what the KIPP Academy has done. They're saying let's put some more time into it. Let's put some more days into it. But then we get back to the old question that keeps coming up. What about the funding? How are we going to pull that off? How are we going to do 205 days of instruction when we can't even fund the 180 days that we currently have?
Briefly?
You know, I'm going to say something that my wife's going to kick me about later on. It's going to be very unpopular in this room. I've got a lot of friends in this room. But I have to say it because I make this observation, and it's something that's astounded me. Sometimes the worst advocates for public schools are parents who have children in public schools. We have 3 children in a great public school. And make no mistake about it, probably 65, 70% of the teachers we've had in the 10 years we've been in that public school do work till 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock on weekends. But make no mistake about it either. I think the biggest disillusionment in our public school is if you go by our public school at 3 o'clock, the doors are locked, no students are allowed in, and everybody's out of that school. And once you leave that school, you're not allowed back in even to pick up your books. And we've had our fair share of teachers too, and I know this is going to be very unpopular with some of my friends here from our kids' public school. We've had our share of teachers who are out the door at 2:30 and trying to get a hold of them or trying to get assistance is impossible. We've had teachers that tell us, sure, we'll be glad to tutor your kid. Our fee is $25 an hour. In fact, I said that at a board meeting, and a directive went down from the area superintendent that teachers at our school are no longer allowed to charge students tutoring fees for after-school tutoring. So that's what we struggle with in public school. And there are some great teachers, and I see some of the teachers I know I'm friends with who are honest nodding their heads because they know who the great teachers are and they know the ones who struggle. But we've got to figure out, and it's what we're trying to do with Merit Pay and everything else in public education. We've got to try, we're struggling, if you really think about it from a policy standpoint, how do we separate the wheat from the chaff? How do we find out who the truly gifted teachers are? Because make no mistake about it, Mr. Gibbs, I wish that every teacher in our public schools was as committed as you. I have a sister who is, but we also have to come up with a system where we recognize and we reward those teachers.
Governor Bush, we've talked a little bit so far about some of the reforms that have taken place in Florida already. You've spent a lot of time going around the country talking about the reform movement. Where does Florida need to go next in your estimation?
I think faithfully implementing the Common Core standards will be the greatest challenge. And
can you briefly explain what that is?
Sure. Common Core standards are standards that have been created by teachers and professors, academics, as well as educators in general, with the support of the National Governors Association and the Council for State School Officers, in other words, all the commissioners of education, the two separate organizations working with a cadre of professionals funded by the Gates Foundation and others have created a set of standards that are benchmarked to the world. So there are fewer of them. Teachers will say that the standards that are, like the Sunshine State standards, there's way too many. You get about 3/4 of the way through the concepts and standards that are in our set of standards in the school year end. So fewer, deeper, higher standards that if implemented today and had and you assessed accurately, 1/3 of our kids would go through this process we call K-12 education, college and or career ready. 1/3. And by the way, we benchmark to the world, we need to benchmark to the world in terms of standards and expectations, which is what Common Core standards are done, and that's work in progress that will be implemented over the next 3 years. But right now in America, we spend more per student than all the countries that Bill mentioned, every one of them. We spend more per student than all of them. So somewhere in between the classroom and the appropriation of money at every level is maybe there needs to be a look at that. Maybe all the other nations don't spend all the money outside of the classroom education. I don't know why it is that way, but we spend more per student. Now we need to have higher expectations and train teachers to these expectations. And one of the things I think will become clear then is that students learn in different ways, and we need to customize the learning experience. So the next iteration of reforms, it seems to me, will be digital learning, where teachers are at the center, front and center of a more blended learning environment where we all work together for kids to achieve these standards. The unions don't like that, because how can you collectively bargain for someone who's creating content, over the thing that Al Gore invented, the internet? It's hard to collectively bargain in Hillsborough for a suite of math courses that have been created by teachers in other parts of the state or other parts of the country, or perhaps even the world. So there'll be big fights on this, but my guess is that over time there will be significant focus on harnessing technology in a way that customizes the learning experience and brings about higher learning benchmarked to the world, which we do not do today.
Well, that's a convenient segue into an issue about virtual education, and Florida made some moves on that front this past spring. And so, Kathleen Oropeza, would you? Is that a type of reform that you could buy into?
Well, I think we need to be really crystal clear here, because something was just blended. There's a big difference between virtual learning and digital learning. Digital learning means harnessing, as Governor Bush said, the technology in the classroom, but with a traditional teacher, with a teacher there to help students go through the lessons. Full-time virtual for K through 8, I don't think so. That's the image that you need to take with you. The difference is Is a teacher going to be there with the best technology in the classroom, a rich learning environment in the classroom, working with the student? Or is your child going to be sitting in front of a corral with a proctor in the room and letting you go out, let the child go out to recess or whatever? You know, this is the reality of what we might be facing. I don't want a 5-year-old spending hours connected to the internet and disconnected to a human teacher. There's no data on any effectiveness on this. There is plenty of data from the American Academy of Pediatrics that says that only an hour and a half to 2 hours a day is appropriate for children for screen time. And these are children from the age of 2 to 12. These are not tiny, tiny children. It goes all the way up to 12. There's something very important that happens in a classroom to your brain and your development of your brain when you are working with a live human teacher. We have to ask ourselves, who's profiting from this? Every high school student now is going to be required to take a virtual course, online course, in order to graduate. So there's, what, 2.4 million students in Florida? An online course might be $1,000. That's a lot of money. So I would argue that while maybe other countries spend less than we do, it'd probably be hard-pressed to find other countries paying such rich contracts to all these test providers and all of these different. It's kind of how I feel.
Okay.
You wrote it all down, too.
I'm prepared.
Well, James Gibbs, again, you're the teacher up here. How do you feel about more virtual education, perhaps not full-time, but having students take at least one course online to graduate from high school?
Well, first I'd like to thank Kathleen, because I thought it was a key point to bring out that virtual learning and digital learning are not one and the same. They are very different. In fact, I consider myself to be a digital teacher. I came out of a technology world, and I bring a lot of technology into my classroom. I recognize that our students are tech savvy, and we have to bring that into our classroom now. And I understand that. But that virtual learning, while viable for some, is not the answer for all. And I don't understand, forgive me as a teacher, I don't understand why everyone's required to take virtual. Certainly there are some students who benefit greatly from virtual. Let's say someone who spent the 5-year plan in middle school, who couldn't quite figure out, sorry, some of you didn't get that one. You know what I'm saying. Who couldn't, socially could not handle the demands of a public school in the confines of a traditional brick and mortar, who think outside the box, who we cannot discount their intelligence, who then find the virtual world and can graduate in high school in 2 to 3 years, do college in 2 to 3 years. I've watched it happen, and thankfully they did because it brought out their greatness, but certainly that's not the answer for every student. We do need students to go to private schools. We do need students to go to charter schools, but we cannot discount the importance of the traditional teacher in the classroom using technology to our benefit. I find that amazing. I do want to step back to one statement because Mr. Bush pointed out that America spends more on students than any other country. And I find that an amazing statement since Florida's near bottom for per student spending and America's at the top. I don't understand where that gap happened. I don't understand why we spend so little for a country that spends so much.
Well, I promised we'd leave time for your questions, and so I see it's 1 o'clock. Let's do that. And fortunately, this first question gets to something that I had on my list, and that is, please address the concept of attaching state funding directly to the student. This is a voucher question, thus allowing parents the ability to choose a school based on the excellence of that school's outcome. Okay. Well, it's a charter question, or rather a voucher question. Would you like to take that, Governor Bush?
It's not necessarily a voucher question. It could be a charter question. It could be a McKay Scholarship question. It could be all sorts of other means of empowering parents to make sure their children have back to the idea of trying to more customize rather than homogenize the learning experience for children, choice is as American as apple pie. I mean, I went to Publix last night with my daughter. There's 15 different variations of milk. There's all sorts of, you can have hamburgers that aren't made of meat. That's what we bought. I couldn't believe it. I mean, why does she want to have a hamburger that was a veggie burger? Well, because there's like 6 of those that you can choose from, and it's part of who we are, and it allows parents to be much more engaged, which I consider to be one of the highest priorities in education. So choice brings about a more dynamic school system. All the independent studies I've seen, other than the one from the Arizona State University that you'll pull out when I finish this, that's funded by the teachers union, create choice brings about improved public education. We're the microcosm, kind of the experiment of this in the country, given all of the ambitious choice programs. And starting in 4-year-old, by the way, the universal pre-K program, which has been implemented, the majority of that literacy-based learning takes place in private settings. Starting from that all the way through college, Florida is one of the leaders, and we've seen learning gains. It's not to say we can't get better, we need to get a lot better, but I don't think people should be threatened by choice. The whole argument about school choice has been around. The same arguments, the world will come to an end, which was the constant refrain in the 90s, now has changed to the world will come to an end. Well, the world isn't going to come to an end. Our students need to do better, and why not harness as many possible ways to make that happen?
Okay. Well, maybe briefly, though, on the specific question of vouchers, maybe you could say how far should that go? We have McKay vouchers now, or scholarships. We have opportunity scholarships. How much farther should that go?
Well, opportunity scholarships are public scholarships, I guess. I mean, they're not private because it was ruled unconstitutional. So I think with the corporate tax scholarship program, the McKay scholarship program, those basically, they're not unlimited, but they're pretty close to it, where parents have that right to choose to go to a private setting combined with universal pre-K. Over time, that's where you're going to see continued progress. We could have the most ambitious school choice programs, including charter schools, without changing any more laws. We already have it, and my guess is it'll continue.
Kathleen Orpeza, you want to comment on vouchers?
Yeah, I have a problem with this scenario where, you know, everything's on an equal playing field, because it isn't. Voucher schools do not have to have the same measures of accountability and the same restrictions and standards that are imposed on a traditional public school. So it's very disturbing when you think about it, that this is money that is going to go, taxpayer money, whether it came from a tax credit program as a way of diverting the funds into a tax credit program that would have gone into our general fund and gone into paying things for our state or not. The fundamental deal is these kids are coming from places where they're not happy or their parents aren't happy. They're trying to make a choice. And the schools are not, they don't have to be accredited. They don't have to have the same curriculum. They don't have to do the Sunshine State standards. They don't have to take FCAT. But the parent's happy because the kid might be wearing a polo shirt with a crest, and the kid may be making A's. But that is horrible to do to the child, because at the end of the day, they won't be going to college because we don't know for sure what kind of performance is underway. We don't know, there's no way of measuring what's going on. You know, it is not an effective way to put a child through school. It's not an informed choice for the parent. And that is a big concern for us. We want to see, if we're going to have all these options, let's have accountability across the board. Let's hold everyone to the same standards.
Yes, please.
The corporate tax scholarship program is for low-income kids. Mm-hmm. It saves the state money. It doesn't cost the state money, because that child has to have been in a public school to opt out. And so had they stayed in the public school, they would be costing $6,500 or whatever it is per student. Instead, they get a scholarship that is significantly less. It saves money. And they have to take norm reference tests. They don't take the dreaded FCAT. I can't believe you would want them to take the FCAT after all that. But you know, free at last might be the response you should come up with. In any case, they take a norm reference test, and there's outside research that has showed that the public schools get better under this system where parents that don't have choices right now, because they don't have the economic firepower to choose, the public schools get better because we empower parents, particularly low-income parents and parents that have children with exceptional education challenges. They have now power that they don't have in other states. And that's why many states, including Indiana, Oklahoma, Arizona, many other states are embracing this model because it improves public education and it empowers parents.
One quick response, and then let's move along.
One quick thing. The state's own economist, he's an economist with Northwestern University, David Figlio, issued his fourth study studying this particular voucher program, and stated that the best thing about the voucher program was that the parents got to make a choice. The children did not learn better. They did not, improve. So what we're doing is we're creating, again, a separate caste system of different kinds of schools that are not held to the same measures of accountability, period. It's not correct. It's not the right thing to do with our taxpayer money.
Okay, I've heard this comment before, so I'll ask this question. Anybody who wants to can answer it. Why hasn't Florida's education reform been a collaborative effort? Why haven't teachers been the driving force behind the necessary changes? Who wants to take that?
I'd be remiss to take it because in Hillsborough County we actually do have a collaborative effort. It's the workings of the administration with the union trying to put together a model, a national model at our county where we can use not a merit pay system as 50%, but a smaller percent, but evaluations by our peers, our mentors, and our principals, and put together a system of a value add that incorporates more than just one high-stakes test, but end-of-course testing, absenteeisms, and enough numbers and data to where we have a fair evaluative system of teachers to show how to produce quality students. So I think the answer is I'm not sure.
Mike, can I tackle that?
Yes, please.
If I could. Because I think it's important to state that here in Orange County, we do have a very collaborative working relationship with our teachers' unions and also with our support personnel unions, and we appreciate that very, very much. And oftentimes, I think sometimes that there's this misperception out there that the union is opposed to every change. Now, all that being said, change is hard. And we are going through a revolutionary time. And I also, and I'm not picking a fight with the unions on this, but I think also sometimes there's a misperception that the unions speak for every teacher. And the unions certainly don't. And every parent knows that as well. Many teachers from the younger generation, for example, are not opposed to standardized testing or many accountability measures. We did something fascinating on the Blue Ribbon Panel for Schools, which is we surveyed all the teachers in Orange County Public Schools. It was a very extensive survey instrument. It was about 6 years ago, and it literally would take about an hour and a half to fill out. We hoped that we would get 400 or 500 responses from the 12,000 or so teachers at that time. We had over 5,000 teachers respond to that survey. And one of the things that we found in that survey is that teachers under the age of 40 who had come out of school during the FCAT era and the accountability era really overwhelmingly supported accountability measures and didn't have issues with it. Teachers over the age of 50 and the generation that had never known merit measures and accountability measures struggled mightily with it. So there is a real disconnect, but all that being said, I think sometimes it's portrayed by the media as this constant friction between school boards and teachers or the legislature and teachers. And I think in many counties it's actually collaborative and not all that combative at all.
Well, since Tracy McDaniel came all this way, I found a question here that directed at him. How do you fund the extra time, longer days and Saturdays, in order to give your students the extra time on instruction? Where do you find the money?
We have to actually raise money to do these things. We don't have enough money to do the after-school programs, Saturday school programs, as well as summer. So we do a lot of fundraising, and we get a lot of corporations to help us locally as well as nationally. So I'm pretty sure all of our KIPP schools across the country do a lot of fundraising and find people like the Gates Foundation and others that would give a lot of money to education because it is a crisis, and we know that it's the civil rights for the next generation. So we have to do something. And inner city, you talked about choice a minute ago. Inner city, where the low socioeconomic neighborhoods, they're the only kids in America without choice. And so that's where KIPP comes in. You know, we believe in choice and commitment. And so we have to, when we go into these areas, though, the kids are so far behind, you need extended school days. So we have to fundraise quite a bit to do that.
Okay. Here's a question about vocational education. I know, Bill Sublette, you've thought about this a little bit. The European school model includes ability testing and direct transition into trade schools for many students. With the new charter school model, how would vocational schools and tech training be integrated into the funding model for our future schools? I think the question is the role that vocational education ought to be playing in education reform.
You know, it's probably the one topic that I like to talk about more than anything else in education. According to the most
Not
recent...
too long, please. We
Okay.
have a lot of questions.
According... It's like asking a Baptist preacher to be brief. You know, the amens alone take 20 minutes. The latest census shows us that 75% of Orange County's population has no college experience whatsoever. Literally not a single semester of college. And while I would love for us to be able to move the needle in this community, and I think we will, in my lifetime, I will be stunned if we get that number below 50%. So the simple fact of the matter is we are always going to have a very, very large segment of our population that decides that college is not for them. And as any teacher can tell you, and as any parent can tell you, and as most of us can remember from our high school days, you know the kids by 9th or 10th grade who have decided that college is not for them. We are failing, in my opinion, and it started in the 60s, an entire generation of students because we are trying to pigeonhole every student into a one-size-fits-all college preparatory curriculum. And it just gets worse year after year after year. Now we require every student not only to take a semester of algebra, but now a semester of physics or chemistry. And what we're doing really is we're dumbing down a lot of core academic subjects to try to fit that square peg into the round hole. So what we've got to do, in my opinion, and I think the pendulum is finally swinging back. I finally hear a discussion on the national stage and in the state of Florida about how we do a better job of what we now call career technical education in the high school grades. Because make no mistake about it, we are the only country that approaches career technical education the way we do. In every other country, a student can elect by age 14, 15, or 16 at the oldest whether to pursue a college track or whether to pursue a career technical track. In America, when you really think about it, we make a kid go in and each and every day punch a time clock until they get that high school diploma before they can go get that AS or that certificate they need to practice a skilled trade. And the one thing that drives me nuts about vocational education is usually when I'm in a smaller group and I make these comments, there's always somebody who raises their hand and says, you know what, Bill, I agree with you. We need more hairdressers. We need more mechanics. That's not what I'm talking about. We don't need more hairdressers and mechanics. We need more CAD drawers. We need more LPNs. We need more X-ray technicians. We need more network specialists. We need more of that wide range, licensed electricians, that wide range of occupations, oftentimes very high-paying occupations, that we're making a kid wait to go to Mid-Florida Tech or Valencia after they get a high school diploma. There's no reason those kids can't graduate from high school with that licensure, with that certification, and be able to enter the workforce ready to work and make a good living.
Kathleen Oropeza, you wanted to say something?
I just wanted to echo what Bill said. You know, providing a child with something to hang on to and something that they're interested in as they move through junior high is a proven dropout preventer. You know, you have a child who may be held back in third grade for obvious reasons, and they go on, they branch out, and they try to get a better handle on their academics. They need something, a lifeline. They need something to hang on to, and that's a prestigious technical option. Every child can learn, but not every child wants to go to college or should go to college. We have thrown out the natural bell curve of life here, and it's against nature not to recognize it. We travel all over the state, and we see different schools and different parents on a regular basis, and we were up in Escambia County, and they do an excellent job of this career development and career training. And I think we shared that with you. They can graduate Microsoft trained and certified able to walk out the door from high school earning $30,000, and they can pay for their next level of training that way. They can support themselves. I mean, these are real things that are being offered to kids in other parts of the state even that are experimental. And we just feel like the local school districts, not the state, the local school districts should have the option and the leverage to develop these kinds of programs. So.
Okay, here's a question. I've heard this comment before too, and see if the panel anyone would like to take this one. What about student and parent accountability in the whole process of education? Everything falls back to the classroom teacher. Who wants to take that one? Are parents being held accountable? No. I see shaking heads.
I would say, Kip, we do have a commitment for parents to sign. And people think that's why we have an edge, but those parents have no intentions of following their commitment. And so, absolutely no intention. So we try to focus, and when we do focus on the child, we actually have to change our parents through their children. With this, we do a lot of homework, and our kids can call the teachers every night, and the parents fight our kids sometimes. But we do a lot of teaching those kids to dream the impossible dream. Because if you walk into an inner city classroom, right now, on day one in third grade, these kids are not going to be successful according to the odds. Education is their ticket. The parents have not been successful in education. They've been successful in sports or in the music world, things like that. But inner city is like a paradigm shift. So it's our job as teachers and administrators to make sure we teach them that they can dream big and we can get them to meet those needs. But as far as the parents, a lot of them just don't know. They don't know how to help the kids with the homework. They don't know what the world we live in today. They don't know about the computer technology age. I will say this. I told my mom the other day, I said, nowhere in the history of this world have we made so many advances in the last 20 years. And she said, you're crazy. I said, no. I said, look at it. The computer's been around. The kids are learning in class. She said, listen, my grandfather, he saw the invention of the train, the car, and the airplane, and the telephone in his lifetime. She said, technology's always been around. You got to embrace it. And so just teach those kids to embrace that. And that's what we're doing now with inner city kids. We have to teach them the dream. But as far as the answer to parents, they're coming along slowly.
Jeb Bush, you had something to say?
I unfortunately concur. I think it's hard to get parents engaged through punitive kind of actions or creating a, FCAT for parents or whatever. It's just not going to work. So while local efforts ought to continue to make sure that parents are, that there's an openness in the schools and that there's an expectation that parents are a key player in all this, I think we need to focus on student responsibility more. I'll just tell you a quick story. I was in Stockholm, Sweden, at a, God forbid in Sweden, socialist Sweden, they have for-profit voucher schools paid for with state money. 25 of these schools are called knowledge schools. You can't tell the difference. These are all basically the money runs with the family. And in this school, which did not have fancy whiteboards and fancy Apple computers, these were old school, the ones that look green on the screen, that old, the technology. And they had a customized learning experience where kids learn at their own pace. They had responsibility for their learning. And there was 32 modules per course. Once they finished the 32nd module, they went on to the next course. I'll never forget, 60% of the kids were immigrant families. They were from Somalia, Morocco, Iraq, and other places where the large diasporas go to Stockholm. There was huge, high expectations for these kids, and the conversation around this table with these 8th grade kids was, we have to take Swedish, we have to take English. We're debating about the third language that we have, the third language, whether it should be Mandarin or Spanish. And I, of course, said Spanish is the one that's really going to work. Shows you how much I know. But the point is, they had high expectations, and kids were totally empowered and responsible for their learning, harnessed by technology, where teachers were the coaches. They played an integral role in this. Without the teachers, it wouldn't happen. But that's the model, and done per student less than what we spend here. Now, if someone's telling me that a kid from Somalia in Stockholm for just 2 years is inherently smarter than kids that live in Orlando, I'll accept it. If you can make that argument to me, come on up afterwards. Let's have a conversation about that. But if you believe that every kid can learn, then there's something wrong with our system where you get these kind of results in urban core, inner city places in Stockholm with less money.
Okay, well, here's a question that maybe James Gibbs might like to speak to. Some of the most innovative teachers find the administrative element to be their biggest barrier to unleashing talent. How do you propose maximizing the potential of these innovative minds? And I've heard teachers before talk about the administrative burdens that are placed on them. How do you get away from that?
I'm not quite sure I totally understand the question. When we talk about administrative burdens, I'm not sure if we're talking about administrative burdens as in a responsibility that I have because of the cuts that we've taken and there's not enough support on our administrative staff, or administrative burdens as I'm acting as an administrator of a...
Well, I can't speculate, so why don't you interpret it any way you want.
So I'll interpret it any way I want to. As a teacher, I'm not in conflict with my administration. In fact, I absolutely adore my administration for what they do and for what they're trying to produce, because our focus is always on the students. And I think that's paramount in any public school, that the teachers and administration are in concert to get the best out of the students. You know, as a teacher, we are clear that we don't want bad teachers in the classroom. There's that word, is there such a thing as a bad teacher? We don't want a bad teacher next door. We don't want to be the bad teacher who's next door. We want to be recognized as great thinkers. We don't want to become the old teacher who's holding things back. You know, everybody wants to be the best performer there can be. Certainly there are superstars. There are rock stars out there who embrace technology, who embrace change, who have the ability, who have the Midas touch with the students. They're out there. I don't feel they're being held back. There's so many opportunities for them to get out and share and do things and put the word out on how to do it, and that all happens through collaborative environments, through the PLCs, through working groups. Our technology helps us with that in our professional development because we can share so much. Certainly, I think every teacher knows that they haven't really invented anything. We just keep ripping off and stealing from everybody else on what they're doing and make it your own. I really don't see that as a difficulty if it's used the right way. There's just some good teachers out there. I was blessed to be called a Teacher of the Year, and I know I'm not even the best in my school. I'm not even the best in my hallway. I'm not the best in my house.
We appreciate the modesty. Well, speaking of teacher recruiting, there's a question here about how are we working to ensure that we attract high-quality teachers into the profession with all of the obstacles the profession faces. Does anyone want to take that one? Is teacher recruiting what it should be?
It's a hard job because I tell people all the time, I say, what's three most difficult challenges in school? I say finding teachers, and finding teachers. It's just a hard job because the pay is not there for one, if you want high-quality teachers. And then number two is the teachers are not actually, we spend a lot of time in education, but our kids are not ready, our teachers are not ready for inner city classrooms either, so, and as well as administrators either. What KIPP has done for me is actually give me a game plan as an administrator. I took the traditional route in education. I was a teacher 5 years, and then I became an administrator, and my job was doing discipline every day for 4 years. And then all of a sudden I get this job, and I'm an instructional leader with no training. And so KIPP gave me training for a solid year to actually run a school. And to do that, it gives me the skills and sets I need to actually bring a teacher on. But now I have a person on my staff who actually would train that teacher. And so she's the teacher's trainer. And that helps me with teacher burnout too as well.
You know, Mike, if I could add to that, you know, in all candor, the economy has a lot to do with it, and we're not having any problem at all in Orange County Public Schools hiring teachers right now. In fact, we get multiple applications for every position that our principals have to fill. Now, that was very, very different 6, 7, 8 years ago. I remember when I was chairing the Blue Ribbon panel, one of the issues that we addressed is how do we get qualified teachers in some of our high poverty schools, because there were literally inner city schools that would go into the 3rd or 4th week of school and still not have all their teacher slots filled. And we were having to recruit in other states and in other territories very, very aggressively. But you know, one of the fundamental questions that you're really asking is, and it keeps coming back to this topic, and that is, are we willing to accept differentiated pay? Are we willing to pay a Rhodes Scholar or a National Merit Scholar who goes into the teaching profession some type of an enhancement to get the best and the brightest into our teaching profession? And I was just having a conversation with Dean Robinson of the UCF College of Education about this very topic before this luncheon started, and about how can we encourage more students in what they call their honors college who are truly the most gifted academically, because to be very candid, if you're a kid looking at professions that you can go into and you have the whole world as your menu because you have the intellectual ability to do that, we're not going to get those kids starting them off at $35,000 per year. We're not going to get the kid who's a gifted scientist and who could go to work for Monsanto or could go to work for any range of companies, DuPont, you name it, and start at $80,000, $85,000 a year at a $35,000 per year salary. So we've got to be willing to pay for the talent the way our universities and our community colleges pay for top-notch talent, and that's a difficult political equation, but I think it's part of the direction we're moving.
Well, that's going to have to be the last word. By my clock, we're about out of time. I want to thank the panelists all for taking the time to come be here.
You've been watching Metro Center Presents, featuring a fascinating debate on the future of education. Continue the discussion on our website. I'm Diane Trees. Thank you for joining us.
This episode of Metro Center Presents is brought to you in part by the UCF Metropolitan Center for Regional Studies and the Orlando Sentinel.